So I think since we are at 1:30, we will get started. So again, welcome to our immigration information session for applying for study permits if you're located inside Canada. My name is Carrie Huber. I'm the manager of graduate marketing and recruitment here with Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs at the University of Waterloo. And joining me today, we have Shannon and Clint from International Experience. Shannon Chung is one of our senior immigration consultants, and Clint McPhee is one of our immigration consultants. And they will be delivering a whole bunch of really helpful information to you throughout this presentation. And if you do have questions, please use the Q&A box. Maybe we would ask that you sort of hold them until a bit closer to the end because they may be covering some of the questions that you have as they go through the information. This session will be recorded, and if you have registered, which you have since you're here, it will be sent to you by email within a day or two following the session. And just want to let everyone know that all the information shared today is also available on our websites and on the Government of Canada websites. So there is nothing here being shared that is only here. It is still accessible through all of our websites. So you don't need to worry about missing out on anything there. Um, and yeah, other than that, I will hand it over to Shannon and Clint to get started.
Thanks, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. So today we are going to be going through applying for a study permit from inside Canada, which may be a new study permit or an extension, depending on your circumstances. Just please note that the information we're presenting today is accurate as of today's date, and things can change over time with immigration policy. The topics we're going to be covering today, we will talk a little bit about the consultants at Waterloo and our service here. And then we're going to get into the mechanics of applying for a study permit from inside Canada. We're going to talk about the provincial attestation letter a little bit, common reasons why a study permit application might get refused, what an explanation letter is, how to follow up with IRCC once you have submitted an application. And finally, we'll have a Q&A period at the end of the session. This is our team of immigration consultants at the University of Waterloo. We all work in the International Experience Center here on campus in Needles Hall, and we have 7 team members. It's a pretty big team. All of us are called RCICs, which is a Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultant. So we're fully licensed and regulated by the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And all of us are, capable of advising on immigration matters for international students. This team is very knowledgeable, very experienced, and they all have a lot of empathy for international students. So hopefully you'll get to meet one or more of the consultants while you're here at Waterloo. What do we do? So we can provide immigration advising. We do so from Monday to Friday, 10 o'clock to 4 p.m. There's virtual appointments over MS Teams. We communicate through phone calls, email, and you can also come in person and have a consultation that way. We also have a check-in session from Monday to Friday at 1 to 2 p.m. every day. This is if you have a quick question or you want to check your permits or something that's not too in-depth, you can sort of check in and it's first come, first serve. We also have a lot of different information sessions. We do orientation like this one. We have website resources. We're going to look at these things a little bit later, so I won't spend too much time talking about them yet. And we do collaborate with campus partners and external partners to further assist international students. What we don't do is we can't represent students on their immigration applications because we do work for the university, so we're not able to be a representative on a file. Um, we don't enforce any immigration rules. We do inform you of the rules, but in no way can we enforce them or do we try to enforce them. And we don't report anything to immigration. We have no direct connection to IRCC, And everything you tell us is held in confidence as part of the consultation here. We have a lot of information online, and this is very like rigorously updated as the changes come through. It's under the International Experience website, and this is the link to the immigration consulting page. If you use this QR code, this is the hub for everything. So if you want to book an appointment with us, learn about different types of applications, get guides, templates, learn about policy, work authorizations. It's all here. So please use this resource. It's always available and it's there to help you out and answer some questions, hopefully, for you. All right. Before I pass it over to Shannon, I'm just going to kind of quickly summarize the immigration documents that are important for you. The most important one is the study permit. That's what the one you can see pictured in the middle of the slide here. It is your main status document in Canada. While you're studying at Waterloo, you will have to have an active study permit for the University of Waterloo. This allows you to remain and study in Canada, and it also allows you to work in Canada with certain limitations. But every study permit for Waterloo, if you're in a degree program, should have the on and off campus work provisions listed on it. And you can see those highlighted in this image here. And number three, may accept employment on or off campus. That should be on your study permit. That's what allows you to work. This also allows you to do co-op and degree required internship components, which is the second thing I want to talk about, the co-op work permit. As of April 1st this year, you no longer need a co-op work permit. This used to be a separate work permit you would get with your study permit that allowed you to do co-op and degree required internships. This is no longer necessary. It's simply part of your study permit work authorizations. So if you don't get a co-op work permit, don't worry. You don't need one. Okay. And you shouldn't be getting one really because they're removing that document. And on the right side of the slide here, you can see a temporary resident visa. If you're from a visa required country, this is your entry document to come into Canada. It would be affixed in your passport once you apply for a new one if you're inside Canada after you get a study permit approval. This is simply an entry document. It allows you to come back into the country. It does have to be valid at the time of entry, and it normally would be coded as S1, which is a study permit TRV, but some of you might have a V1 TRV, which is also okay. As long as you have a valid entry document, you should be allowed to enter. If you're from a visa required country, a visa exempt country, you won't have one of these. You'll have something called an electronic travel authorization, and it won't be physically in your passport. It's purely electronic. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Shannon for the next section.
Thank you, Clint. Now, talking about the study permit application and the required documents. So when applying for a study permit application from inside Canada, you must hold a valid study permit or a valid work permit. So if you scan the QR code, it will bring you directly to our page on the study permit application from inside Canada. And although this page is built for current students, the application process is very similar. In this page, you will find many resources on the required documents, and more importantly, there is a template that we built on how to fill in the IMM 5709 form, which is the main application for the study permit extension. So along with the main application form, the study permit application from inside Canada will require your official offer of admission and letter of acceptance from Waterloo, downloadable through Quest, a valid passport or travel document that's issued from your country of citizenship. And if it's possible, we always recommend that your passport is valid for the entire duration of your studies in Canada. You will also need to show evidence of sufficient funds. So you must provide proof showing a minimum fund of $22,895. This is for living expenses for 1 year for a single applicant. Tuition fees for the first year of study, which is equivalent to 3 terms, and related travel expenses. If you do have family that is accompanying you to Canada, so let's say you have a spouse or children, is that your finances will also need to support any accompanying family members included in your application. The provincial attestation letter exception will also need to be included in this application, and more information will be provided in the later slides. The application will also require a passport-sized photo of yourself that meets IRCC specifications, an explanation letter, which we will go into in more details in the coming slides, and also valid biometrics. So if you're already in Canada with a valid study permit or a work permit, you must have potentially given biometrics in the past. And if so, and they are still valid, it will usually be valid for 10 years. If you haven't done so before, is that after you submit the application, a biometrics instruction letter will be issued for you to complete biometrics. And you will want to do that as soon as possible so that your application can begin its processing. If you're a US citizen or national, you are not required to give biometrics as part of the study permit application. Some study permit applications may also require a proof of an immigration medical exam, and if you've completed a medical exam, they are valid for 12 months. A police certificate, if that's requested. And if you plan on paying tuition in advance, is that you can provide proof of tuition payment, and you can use the tuition fee estimator. And the estimator will email you a PDF letter with the approximate amount of your total cost and instructions on how to pay your tuition in advance. So after you have accepted your offer of admission and your payment has arrived, it usually takes about 7 to 10 business days. You can log into your Quest account and access the official tuition receipt to include as part of your study permit application. In terms of the proof of funds section, you must outline sufficient financial support. As you're extending your permit or your status for graduate school, you still need to demonstrate that you meet the minimum fund of 22,895 Canadian dollars for living expenses for 1 year for a single applicant, 1 year of tuition. So in most cases, again, this will be 3 terms, and the related travel expenses. So a return ticket to your home country. The financial support must be liquid asset, so it cannot be anything that is fixed or any property, land, or jewelries or cars that you have. And some examples of the proof of finances are listed on the right-hand side, which will include the bank statements for the last 4 months, proof of payment of any tuition, letter of support from your financial supporter or sponsor, any sort of proof of funding that you receive from the school, employment if you're currently in Canada on a work permit, or if you have any guaranteed investments or GICs that you include as part of this application. If you're accepted to a co-op or internship program, as Clint did discuss earlier, as of April 1st, 2026, you no longer need a separate work permit to participate in student work placements required by your program. You may still be required to provide a letter confirming that there is a co-op or internship component required as part of the completion of your program. And if requested on your document checklist, when applying for your study permit, upload your offer of admissions and letter of acceptance twice. So under the letter of acceptance or letter of enrollment registration slot, as well as the co-op letter slot, with the internship section highlighted. You will not receive a separate co-op work permit, but when you receive your study permit, please do double check that it contains the appropriate work conditions, which are highlighted here, as without these work conditions, you cannot start your co-op placement. Okay, so once you get your original permit, check for these work conditions. If it's not there, connect with us immediately. Okay, so now jumping into the provincial attestation letter. So what is this PAL? So a PAL is a letter issued by the province of Ontario and allows an international student to apply for a study permit at a specific designated learning institution. The PAL was introduced as part of the Study Permit CAP initiative, which began in 2024. If you're accepted into a degree granting graduate program at the master's or doctoral level, you meet the exception for a PAL. If you're accepted to a graduate diploma program, you require a PAL for the study permit application. If you're applying for multiple study permits together with your dependents on the same application, any study permit applicants accepted to a degree granting program other than a master's or doctoral level will need to include their own PAL. So again, if you're accepted to a degree granting graduate program at the master's or doctoral level, you meet the exception for a PAL, and we will go through what to upload in the slot to confirm your exemption in the next slide. If you're accepted to a graduate diploma program, you will require a PAL, and the PAL will be valid until December 31st, 2026. So for those accepted to the graduate diploma program, the admissions team will work directly with you to confirm the requirements for the PAL. If your application for the study permit is withdrawn from IRCC for any reason, you can submit another study permit application with the same PAL if your PAL and your status in Canada are still valid. If your study permit application was refused, then you must get a new PAL before reapplying. And again, your status in Canada must also still be valid for you to apply using the Inside Canada method. So if you are accepted to a degree granting graduate program at the master's or doctoral level, you meet the exception for a PAL, you will want to include the following document in the PAL exception slot. So in a Word document, confirm your exception, which is, I am applying for a degree granting graduate program at the master's or doctoral level at a public designated learning institution. Therefore, I meet one of the exceptions listed under Who Doesn't Need a PAL or TAL heading at the following website. Please do ensure that the link to the IRCC website is there for the processing officer to refer to your exception. So scan the QR code and it will bring you directly to the website where you will link to your Word document. So starting January 21st, 2025, your spouse or common law partner may be eligible for an open work permit if you have a valid study permit and you're either studying a master's degree of at least 16 months or longer, or studying in a doctoral degree program. For spousal open work permit application, you must provide the valid letter of acceptance or the proof of enrollment letter from the University of Waterloo, as well as proof of relationship documents. So for example, your marriage certificate or the statutory declaration of common law. And if you're applying separately, so after you have received your valid study permit, in addition to the above documents, provide a copy of your approved study permit and passport biodata page. When starting a study permit application, first you'll need to create an IRCC secure account. And after creating your account or logging into your account, scroll down to Apply to Come to Canada to start the application. Click the Visitor Visa Study and/or Work Permit. Then from there, you'll need to complete the eligibility questionnaire, which will then take you to the document checklist, where you will gather and upload your supporting documents. The document checklist should look very similar to what appears here on the left-hand side, with the main mandatory application form, the IMM 5709, as well as the supporting documents required, which would include the uploading of the PAL exception, as we discussed, and other documents depending on your situation. The optional documents would include the Schedule 1 form, which is only mandatory if you have participated in military services, were part of a political group, or have a criminal record. And also, lastly, there's the client information, where you will upload your explanation letter and any other supporting documents you feel necessary to support your study permit application. The basic study permit application fee is $150. And if you require biometrics, it is an additional $85 added to your application. Okay, now I will bring it back to Clint for the common reasons for refusal.
Thanks, Shannon. All right. Um, so I think there's this idea that you are less likely to get a refusal if you're already inside Canada and you're doing an extension, but there is still always a chance of refusal. So you don't want to be too comfortable. You still want to sort of go through the process and make sure that you're protecting yourself on your application. Um, Study permit refusals are usually issued under Regulation 216(1)B, where it says an officer shall issue a study permit to a foreign national if, following an examination, it is established that the foreign national will leave Canada by the end of the period authorized for their stay. And if we look at the next slide, we can break that down a bit more. So under 216(1), usually one of the following reasons would apply for the officer's decision in the refusal. Based on the purpose of your visit, based on your personal assets and financial status, based on your family ties in Canada and in your country of residence, based on your current employment situation, and based on your travel history. So these are the most common reasons given under Regulation 216(1), which leads us to this idea that you want to have a letter in your application, a letter of explanation or a study plan or an explanation letter that you're going to upload with your application to sort of ensure that the officer doesn't come to one of these determinations. So let's take a look at kind of a top level view of this. The explanation letter would be included so that you could advocate for yourself, tell your story, provide more information so that there aren't any gaps in the information that might impact the officer's reasoning, and just to sort of preempt any likelihood of a refusal or of this idea that the officer thinks it might be a risk to approve the study permit application. You can find a list of topics for a study plan if you go to this QR code and go to the website. A lot of these may not apply to you, but it's sort of a catch-all list that of topics that you could possibly put into this kind of letter of explanation. So when you're creating this explanation letter, a few important things to remember. It really shouldn't be more than 2 pages in length because officers typically don't have enough time to read through anything longer than that when they're looking at applications. And it should be written by you. Try not to follow a template or try not to have it like just generated by AI. It's better to sort of write it first and then maybe use those tools later to refine it. And it should be logical, reasonable, and realistic. The letter is important for your application. Even though you're inside Canada, there still is important to emphasize that you will leave at the end of the period authorized for your stay, that you are a genuine student, and that you are what they call a bona fide temporary resident. So, some elements that you should consider including in this explanation letter. Let's get into a bit more detail here. The first, and I think everybody should be including this in their letter, no matter your background or where you're coming from. Why this program? Why Waterloo? What's your motivation to pursue a graduate degree here? And why did you choose this specific degree program? So you can talk about the reputation of our school, the global ranking, the ranking in your specific field of study. If there's scholarship opportunities or funding opportunities, you can highlight those. Also, you can talk about degree required work opportunities, if that's applicable, co-ops, internships, field placements, and even the facilities that the school provides. Maybe there's specific equipment, labs, or other things that you have access to that Waterloo provides as opposed to other schools or other programs. And as an extension of this idea of why Waterloo, why this program? And this is more like your personal trajectory, right? Your story. What were you doing before now? right? What were you studying? Were you working? What sort of professional experience and history do you have? What's your personal history? What are your interests? What are you moving towards? If you're currently in an academic program and you're finishing that up, you can talk about, undergrad studies or coming from another school or another program. And what's your overall educational goal? How does this fit into the puzzle of, where you came from and where you're hoping to go to? So it is important to address this in your letter as well, so the officer has a clear idea of what you're trying to do. For some of you, maybe you've had a recent or a previous study permit refusal. For any refusals, you do have to declare this on an immigration application in the application form itself. But if you've had a recent study permit refusal, you should probably address that in this letter of explanation. And whatever the reasons for refusal were, you would want to highlight how you are addressing those refusal reasons directly in this application. So if you were previously refused due to weak ties from outside Canada, you might want to go back and emphasize, look, I do have a lot of strong ties to my home country and kind of illustrate what those are in that example, right? Um, if you are doing this and you need to do this, remember, you still want to try and keep it as concise and focused as possible and keep that 2 pages maximum length in mind. That is very important. Another thing that may seem unusual, but it is very effective, you can have a statement towards the end of this letter, just sort of declaring to the officer, I do understand Canadian immigration regulations. I do intend to comply with them. I will not be overstaying my status. I won't be working without authorization. Having a statement like that towards the end of your letter is impactful, and it can reassure the officer that, your intentions are good and you do sort of have an awareness of what is allowed while you're in Canada. Okay, so we touched on some of the factors you could include, some of the points you could include, but again, there may be more things relative to your individual circumstances that you might want to work into that letter. In terms of the formatting and the presentation of the letter, do be aware, like the officers are quickly kind of skimming and scanning through these. So it's good to have a font that reads easily, like for example, Arial, Calibri, something that is easy to read on a screen. Um, and you can highlight things, you can bold things, but try not to overdo it. Be selective there. If you're going to be scanning other documents as part of your letter that they didn't ask for in the mandatory documents, try to keep the scans relatively clear, clean. Avoid having fingers in the scan, especially if it's like a passport scan or something like that. If you need to, you can use AI, for example, as sort of a refining tool, like after you've written your letter to get suggestions, maybe to correct grammar and syntax. I mean, that's perfectly fine. And really just try to have the letter organized in a way that it's very clear, concise, easy to read. It sort of has a flow to it, so that the officer can kind of quickly assess and then move forward. Once you're done creating this letter, you will need to upload it to your application. They don't ask for it anywhere in the application, so you do have to upload it in the optional documents under client information. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Shannon for the last section of the presentation.
Sounds good. So let's now jump into after the application is submitted. So check the processing times by scanning the QR code here. And depending on whether you are applying for the study permit while holding a valid study permit or a valid work permit may change the processing time, as one would be considered a study permit extension and the other will be considered a first study permit application. But overall, the processing times are generally very similar. you're looking at, as of right now, currently, I would say an average of about 2 months. So if you're looking at starting in fall, this is a good time to apply. If you apply for a study permit application from inside Canada, before your status expires, you may remain in Canada until a decision is made on your application. So if you are currently in Canada on a valid work permit status, then you will have to wait until your study permit is approved before starting your degree program. If you're extending an existing study permit that was issued for a different designated learning institution, you need to make sure you apply within 90 days of your program completion from that other institution, and you will have to wait until the study permit extension is approved before starting your studies at the University of Waterloo. If you are extending an existing study permit that was issued for the University of Waterloo, then you can start your graduate studies under maintained status. And if the application is refused, this is when you will need to stop studying. You should avoid exiting Canada during maintained status, as you may end up losing your status in Canada. So if you have already applied for the study permit application and has surpassed the average posted processing time, you should consider reaching out to RCC. Web form is the preferred method of communication as it has specific fields which asks about your application, your unique client identifier information, and can link the web form directly to your application. The web form can also be used to add any additional documentation or information to your ongoing application that will benefit the application processing. Do note, if you're submitting a web form, be sure to take a screenshot or print the PDF of the whole page of the submission before you submit it, as this is the only record of your submission. And try not to send too many web forms, as this may delay the processing of your application, as RCC will need to review the web forms before processing your application. So now just jumping into the post-graduation work permit. So it is an open work permit that will be issued for 3 years from the date of approval. It's an opportunity for you to gain Canadian work experience, which can assist you in qualifying for permanent residency. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so you can only be issued it once. So if you're a master's student thinking about potentially going into PhD studies, is that you may want to consider saving this work permit until after you complete your final PhD program. It will also require full-time and continuous studies. So this would mean that you're not taking any unscheduled off terms or part-time terms during the middle of your program. But if your last and final term and you only need a part-time course load, is that can be okay in terms of the post-graduation work permit eligibility. But this will only be fine on your last and final term. You cannot apply until you're officially degree awarded. And starting November 1st, 2024, all post-graduation work permit applicants must complete an approved English or French language test and provide the results. So we do encourage that you book your test date well in advance on completing your program. So let's say during your last and final month of your program. You can review our website or register to attend our PGWP info sessions in the future, and you can scan the QR code that should bring you directly to the post-graduation work permit page. So we also have immigration information sessions that happen every term. You can scan our QR code to get to our events page, and here you can find and register for our immigration information sessions, which will include topics like the post-graduation work permit, the general eligibility criteria, as well as how to prevent any potential refusals. We also talk about temporary resident visas, inviting your family, working in Canada, as well as permanent residency to give you a more general overview of Express Entry. There will also be a live Q&A period offered at the end of each session. So if you're interested, do look and register in advance and check out portal events for the dates and locations and register in advance. So once you're matriculated and you can connect with an immigration consultant. So we do offer in-person and virtual appointments available every weekday from Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you have already met with any of the immigration consultants previously, so let's say you're currently an undergrad going into your grad studies, you can email us directly, or you can email the immigration consultant that you've been speaking with directly for a follow-up appointment. Virtual appointments are offered by MS Teams or through phone, and we do offer in-person appointments at the International Experience Center at Needles Hall. You will want to, if you want to sign up for same-day appointments, you can sign up virtually through the Waterloo's portal app, and the registration does start at 8 a.m. each day. And Clint also did mention we do have a check-in or drop-by session in the Global Lounge at the International Experience Center, Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And this is only available in person on a first come, first served basis. Okay, and any other like regular questions that you have that we may not have time to go through today, we also have a web form here where you can submit your inquiry to the team of consultants.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon and Clint, for all of that super helpful information. Couple of questions to get us started off around the financial requirements, which we always get lots of questions about. So there's someone coming with a fully funded PhD program, applying for their study permit. They're transitioning from a closed work permit, but they don't have that required amount in their bank account just because of life circumstances and situation. They're sort of, will that harm their application?
Um, I guess I'll take this one. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a difficult situation, right? And you definitely want to ensure that the officer feels like this is a realistic program to take on financially. So, given the situation, like if it's you and your child, I think the officer would be looking at the living expenses being about 28,000 per year. That's sort of the metric they have for living for a year in Canada, room and board costs like that, food, utilities. And then, of course, there's the cost of your program itself, the tuition, right? So I think in your situation, you'd probably be really want to break down the funding, highlight that, how much funding you're getting per year for your program. Also highlight that this is over a period of 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is, to show sort of that ongoing stability from the funding. And then whatever personal resources you can loop into that number, um, have that number there as sort of your total resources, and then try to show the officer what your actual expenses will be and contrast that with what you have. Hopefully, there'll be enough there to sort of cover the 28,000 plus your tuition for a year, or at least get very close to it, ideally, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Clint. And we do have, where did my study and living costs page go? I'm going to put this in the chat if you need. I mean, I know if you've been in Canada, so you do have an idea already of what your costs and expenses are. But just if anybody else does need this, we do have just a chart with some different expenses there on that page that can help with the budgeting. But again, may not be an issue since you're already in Canada, but just in case. Another question about funding for proof of funds. This person has funding. They need to show proof of funds, or can you deduct the amount of funding needed for the proof of funds? I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you would show like your funding, you would show how much of it covers tuition, and then whatever else is left over, it needs to be that plus whatever you have to get to that $23,000 mark. So it's all part of it. So you have your lump sum of funding. take tuition out of that. Whatever is left over plus whatever you're contributing has to equal that $23,000. So tuition is like a separate thing. So I hope that clarifies that one. Next one. This is actually sort of technicalities about booking a virtual appointment. They didn't receive the information for the virtual meeting. They don't have access to their Waterloo email yet. Can they book a session with not using their Waterloo email? If another email address, is that possible?
Yeah, like as long as you're matriculated, so you have access to Quest to book an appointment, is just be sure to put in, because I think you get sent a web form or an email to submit a web form, right? So if it's possible, make sure you submit the web form because that's where you put in your preferred mode of contact. So you can also put in another email address, or we do have access to find other emails, right? Like that you've used to, let's say, apply for grad school or admissions. So apply, or if you're able to book the appointment. And generally, the link that we send to meet with you may not come until as late as on the time of the appointment, just because we're pretty busy. Okay. So try not to cancel it ahead of time. Try to wait for the appointment or just keep it there. Because we'll try to find or try our best to find the best mode of contact to contact you for the appointments.
That makes sense. Thanks, Shannon. Someone else wants to clarify a rule regarding travel. They currently hold an open work permit that expires this coming September. If they submit their study permit application from inside Canada now, does it mean that they're not allowed to leave the country while their application is still being processed?
Okay. So they hold an open work permit.
Hmm.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong question here. I see. Okay, yeah, like I mean the open work permit status itself is going to remain a viable status until it actually expires in September. And I would guess that you have a visa in your passport that's still valid as well. This is something we don't really have information on, but you would need to have a valid visa or ETA to come back into Canada, right? So if you have those two things and you submit your study permit application from inside Canada, you could certainly leave and come back just on your work permit status with a visa. Um, I think that's fine. However, you would definitely want to be back before the work permit expires and your visa expire, right? Otherwise, it's going to create problems. The other thing to be mindful of here is if you have a study permit, or if you don't have a study permit and this is your first study permit, or if you have a study permit for another school and you're now coming to Waterloo, that study permit does need to actually be approved before you start your studies here. So just another thing to be mindful of in this scenario.
Thanks, Clint. So here's one around passport expiry. They're currently inside Canada. Their passport is expiring in this coming January 2027. Um, should they get their passport, come back to Canada and apply for a study permit from inside Canada, or go back home and apply for their study permit from there?
I feel like we're missing a lot of information. I
Yeah.
think the key point would be what is your current status in Canada and when does that expire? Right? So
Mm,
if there is any way that you can come back and also whether you're our current Waterloo student, right? Because if you're currently a Waterloo student, then definitely we would probably suggest you applying in Canada so that you can start your studies versus if you're not currently a Waterloo student, then there really isn't a real benefit to applying in Canada versus outside of Canada, right? Because either way, you're going to have to wait till the approval, either come in or start studies from there. So it all depends on do you have status and what is that status, right? So maybe this would be like a better to book an appointment with us to just kind of go through your specific situation.
yeah. Thanks, Shannon. And that's a good point. Sometimes there are a lot of nuance in everybody's situation. So it can be helpful to get that one-on-one support. Someone is coming for a course-based master's. They will find out if they get their necessary funds as of June 10th. We do always have a lot of messaging out there to apply for your study permit as soon as possible, but in this case, should they wait until they have confirmation of that, or should they start their study permit now?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because, you want to get it in as soon as you can. It is taking about 2 to 3 months for these to process, right, in general. At the same time, if this loan is vital to show the minimum amount of funds you need for the year, I think it's a bit of a risk to go ahead and apply before actually securing the loan if it's that pivotal to your application, because the officer could easily see that as an issue and potentially refuse, right? Or it could at least delay your application anyway if they come back and ask for more information. So ideally, in a perfect world, I would say wait until you secured the loan, and then apply. But you'd have to look at the processing times there. It could be pretty tight at that point. The only other option you would have is to apply and then upload proof of the loan later through a web form, but that's generally not a great idea if it can be avoided.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to ask about that, but that makes sense. That there is an opportunity, like if you do find out you get this loan and it's tight in terms of the fall start term, you may be able to defer your start date. I don't know if that affects your loan at all, so you may want to check into that as well when you get the loan, because we do often offer deferrals when there's delays with study permits. So just things to consider. So someone will be transitioning from a work permit to a study permit. Will a guarantee from their current employer for part-time work during the academic period? Can that be additional funding justification? Well, I think you'd have to have the funds, right? Already,
Yes.
or no, or prove that they are coming in or
Yeah,
going
so
to
in
come in.
general, you will want to show that you have funds readily available already, okay? Because like work is more kind of like a secondary in the event that I need more funds, right? Like let's say
Mm,
living cost or rent did increase, right? Is that yes, I do have part-time work. But be very careful with that, okay? Because if your work permit is expiring very soon, is that you will need to stop work as soon as that work permit expires, right? And you won't be able to start working until your program actually starts, which will require you to have a valid study permit. Okay, so if this employment or guaranteed employment is confirming that you're going to be working part-time all the way or indefinitely, right? Is that immigration may think that you're working without authorization. Okay, so be careful with that, right? It's also very specific, okay, like to your situation. Um, but yes, it's more of a secondary proof of funds.
that makes sense. Thanks, Shannon. Last one in here, this is a very particular case as well. As you mentioned, need to demonstrate intent to leave Canada after studies, but they currently have an ongoing inland spousal sponsorship PR application. How should they address this in their letter of explanation so it doesn't contradict their PR application?
I'm glad, Tong, I'm glad you brought this up. Like dual intent it's a big deal when officers are assessing temporary applications, right? I think we kind of touched on the idea of dual intent without calling it dual intent. So that the basic concept of dual intent is, despite you having this PR application in process and the likelihood that it is going to be approved maybe later this year even, right? It's like it's an imminent thing. You still I think in your letter of explanation, you can definitely address this. You can say, I do have this ongoing PR app. I think even when you start the application, there is a question where they ask you if you have a PR app in process. So you would have to say yes to that as well in the questionnaire. So you're declaring it, right? And of course, you're declaring your spouse on the application form, right? All of these things are covered. It should be fine. Again, you just want to emphasize that you are looking to take this academic program, why it's important to you, how it fits into your overall career plan, academic plan, and just emphasize that you are aware that you have a temporary status. And if that temporary status does run out before you get your PR, you will exit Canada, right? As long as you make that clear to the officer that you are pursuing both things simultaneously, it should be okay. But if you don't mention anything about it, then yeah, it's a little bit risky, right? You definitely want to declare it and explain it in your own words.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. Do have a couple more came at the last minute here. Um, Wife is on a study permit for master's program. They have an open work permit as the spouse. Their permits expire in January. She's transferred to a PhD program, need to extend her study permit. And this person also applied to extend their open work permit. Um, and is there anything important to keep in mind when applying for both extensions around the same time?
Ooh, that's a tough
I
question.
was going to say we're getting lots of interesting ones today.
Yeah. Okay. So when an applicant is in Canada, if you are an accompanying dependent, you are eligible for an open work permit. Okay. So your spouse is in Canada as a student, you are accompanying your spouse, so you're eligible for an open work permit. As soon as you are applying for your own main status, so you've switched to, I have now received acceptance to a master's degree and I'm going to apply for a study permit, is you are no longer eligible as an accompanying dependent for an open work permit. So if you're looking at, I want to also apply for an open work permit based on my spouse applying for an extension for a PhD program, is that you should be submitting that application now, not your study permit. Right. So it's more of what is your intentions, right? Like if your intentions is to work and you want that open work permit, is that you should get that, have it processed and approved before you have intentions of studying. Okay. Because once you apply for a study permit on your own merits, is that you no longer then are eligible for an open work permit based on an accompanying dependent.
Hmm. Yep, that makes sense. Thanks, Shannon. Another one here, I know we've touched on the financial stuff already, but I do just want to address an aspect of this one, because this person says their program is fully funded, including living expenses and tuition. But just a note of caution there, if your funding, especially if it's a pre-PhD program, it will cover your tuition. It will not cover all your living expenses. This can be a common misconception. Well, there will be some left over after you pay your tuition. Our funding is not meant to cover all of your living expenses. So just have some awareness of that. And we did post that. I did have that housing and living costs page there, which is good to consult for some sort of basic expenses. So just keep that in mind. But also, as we mentioned before, you need to take your tuition, that chunk out of the funding, and then whatever's left over in the funding, plus then you need to show you have enough to get you to that $23,000. So yes, so important to keep in mind that your PhD funding is not meant to cover all of your living expenses, because the cost of living in Canada is, it's not super cheap, unfortunately. So it's good to keep in mind that you will still need some extra over and above that. So um, yeah, I think that covers everything for now. So thank you everyone for attending today. Thanks to Shannon and Clint for all your very helpful information. And we wish you the best of luck in applying for your permits, and we hope to see you in the fall. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.